Today we're going to be talking about After Hours and American Werewolf in London, which might seem like kind of a strange combination of movies, but they both star Griffin Dunn. It's one of my an actor that I like a lot. And and another funny thing about these movies is that John Landis directs one, and John Landis directs American Werewolf in London, and Scorsese directs After Hours. Griffin Dunn is in both the movies, and John Landis makes a movie the same year called Into the Night, which has the exact same premise as After Hours. I don't know if you remember that movie, Michael,
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
with Michelle Pfeiffer and Jeff Goldblum. Um, that
right.
has the same premise. When I was thinking of like what are the similarities between these two movies, that movie came to mind. It's another kind of tenuous connection between these two movies. But anyway, we're going to start with American Werewolf in London. Um, why don't you tell me what you think of this film, Michael?
Well, it's a. I found it a very strange film. It's like a film that, on the one hand, is a comedy, but on the other hand, in uh, and this is a giveaway, but you got to talk about the ending in this kind of film. The, on the other hand, is a tragedy. I mean, the the uh, the American becomes a werewolf. He doesn't believe he's going to become a werewolf, and he doesn't pay attention to the warnings. And his friend, who was killed by a werewolf, comes back to him as a kind of uh, ghost or spirit, and he cannot rest easily. He can't put to rest, and it's part of the comedy of it is that he's continuing. Every time you see him, he's disintegrated a little more, and and uh, and that manages to be funny. You wouldn't think a rotting corpse would be funny, but it is funny.
Human
And
meatloaf.
or at least, yeah, you know, and or at least humorous, And he shows up. Sometimes it gives you a scare. He's in the mirror, kind of thing, and but he cannot be really dead. He's experiencing a situation. He can't be really dead until the last in line of these werewolves, which is the American, is killed. So he's coming back from the dead, not with some kind of message of to help, but just saying you got to kill yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to become a werewolf. You got to kill yourself, and that's a very strange message for a movie to have, because these two movies that have that suicide theme in common, uh, and and the no one is saved in a sense. The werewolf becomes a werewolf. He kills six people, and too bad on them is kind of the movie's attitude. And then uh, the shining light of the movie, Jenny Allgood, uh, kind of draws him out so that he can finally get killed. He doesn't want to, but and so that's the arc of the picture. And I think it's one of the stranger movie arcs I've ever seen in my life. Uh, what did you think?
Um, well, I think that there's kind of two subtexts in this movie. One that is pretty surface, and then there's one that's a little deeper. Um, One is just the guy being a young man and contending with his kind of with these urges that he has, like sexual urges and animal urges, and growing up and kind of trying to tame those urges. But I think a really very obvious subtext of this movie, which is alluded to over and over again in this movie, is the Jewish experience,
Mm-hmm.
and these two, whether the kind of the fears and neuroses and and just the like historical experience and the relationships between uh, different Jewish people and their historical experience. Like they go into this village, they go into they're total strangers in this saloon,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they get expelled from the saloon, and and then the villagers know that they're gonna get massacred, but they don't do anything about it, right? So
Right.
and then he's out there. He sees his friend get attacked, and like one of the more poignant scenes in the movie, sees his friend
Mm-hmm.
get attacked, and he starts running away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's
Yes.
like Jack, and he runs back, and Jack's dead, and then the villagers are there, and they take care of the werewolf, right? And I think that the big part of this movie is with Jack coming back and saying
Mm-hmm.
you have to kill yourself. Um, uh, that a big part of this movie is about survivor's guilt and
Mm-hmm.
and the survivor's guilt of because they allude, I mean, blatantly too. I mean, there's the scene where the like Nazi werewolf guys come into his family's
Right. Right.
uh, living room and kill everybody, and they actually show him like shooting the menorah off the mantelpiece, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And she alludes also, like the nurse says, you know, he's a Jew. I checked, you know,
Right. Right.
so I think that that's not like by accident that all these
No. No.
things are in the movie, and that's a really fascinating thing about this movie to me because I didn't see when I figured that out and I kind of and I tried to look up something, and there was one article about it from I think the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, from like the 80s or something that alluded
Mm-hmm.
to that. But yeah, I think that's a big part of the film, um, and that there's even deeper parts of that whole thing. I think John Landis really kind of worked that into the movie, and that idea of being the other, um, especially in
Mm-hmm.
those saloon scenes, and you know, trying to tell a joke and trying to fit in, and people just rejecting you and expelling you from from the village, and then not helping when you're being attacked, and you know, like letting it happen. It all kind of seems kind of obvious, but so that's one theme of the movie, and then there's a whole comedic aspect to the movie too, that and I think Griffin Dunn is really a good comedic actor, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
plays that part really well. And the main character, David McNaughton, too, um, is a really good actor. I think he was kind of playing himself. But
Yes, I
it's
got
funny
that
because
sense.
both of these
I couldn't tell
guys,
whether he's being a good actor or not, but I think he
yeah,
was playing himself.
yeah, but because he
And
was
he had
the
a great face for being a werewolf.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
he gets a particular expression on his face, and he doesn't need much costuming to look at him as a werewolf.
yeah, yeah.
Although he's very costumed at the end.
He was the he was like the Dr. Pepper guy in the late '70s.
Right,
I'm a pepper,
right.
you're a
That's where
pepper.
yes,
Yeah,
that's where I've seen him. I knew I'd seen him in something.
yeah. And
Huh.
I think he only appeared in one or two other movies after that movie. I don't know if he got typecast or what, but he's he's very good with Jenny Agutter, and it their back and forth in the movie is good and natural. You know, like everybody acted very naturally in the movie.
Yes.
And,
It's the only film, and this doesn't rate as very high film criticism, but it is the only film I've seen her in. You know, we talked about her. I don't know if we did on the air, so to speak. But she's a special actress. She just affects you. You know, you see her and you're full of sympathy and you hope empathy for her.
Yeah.
And it's the only movie I've seen her. She has that wonderful, attentive, intelligent. But in this movie, she smiles all the way.
Yeah.
I don't mean all the way through the movie. I mean a smile that's all the way a smile, and that actresses very rarely do that. They train themselves to smile without showing their gums, but she didn't care.
Yeah.
She had this wonderful, happy grin, you know, and showed her gums and looked very young when she did, and genuinely happy. And you don't see that much. And so that's just kind of a footnote to the Jenny Agutter story.
Yeah.
But and the ending confused me a little, because the werewolf, as the end of every werewolf movie, the werewolf dies. We know that. It's like Hamlet dying at the end of Hamlet. You know, you always know Hamlet's going to die. We always know the werewolf is going to die. And she's standing there, horrified. 6 people have been dead. And she's risked her life, really, to draw him out, because he has to be killed by somebody who loves him, which is also an interesting twist of the movie. And I say this very honestly, you're much better at subtext than I am. I stop at the obvious usually, but and I don't know where Agutter fits in that, but she's standing there, she's drawing him out. They kill him. The one funny bit in the movie for me was that the lines that go something like, "You have to be killed by a silver bullet." Because really, come on, because any kind of gun can kill him. So it has to be a silver bullet. So going, are you superstitious or what? This silver bullet stuff. But so basically it's a firing squad as he's coming out to her, and the last shot is just her shock. She's just standing there in the alley, and her shock at what's happened, and then boom, flat, hard cut to the end.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that hard cut, and I was going, where's the closure scene? And then I was kind of ashamed of myself for wanting that. But what happens to Jenny? Kind of thing. Did you feel that about the ending?
Yeah, I didn't remember when I watched it again. I didn't remember that it just ends like that. But I like that a lot, and it's a weird movie. There's a lot of things in the movie that I'm like, I didn't expect this from John Landis. You know?
Mm-hmm. Right? Exactly.
And I like John Landis movies a lot. Like I think he was one of those kind of early 80s comedy classic guys that made movies that were. He got the actors to give a really natural performance, like Animal House. It's genuine, and
yes.
And I was gonna say about the Jenny Agutter, there's a bunch of unnecessary scenes with Jenny Agutter that they're not bad scenes, but they for some reason he really wanted to develop that character, and so he has these like nursing scenes that don't add to the story at all, where she's just taking care of kids or walking around the hospital or something. And I think that I don't know, like it's kind of like a director's love of Jenny Agutter. He's like, I got her for this movie, so I'm gonna showcase her in a sense. But
well, I was glad he did.
Yeah.
Being a fan, just purely and simply. But I think in terms of the film, it she grounds the film that way. You know, she's an intelligent person. She's a very useful person in society. She's a humble person, and doesn't see herself as anything special. And I think otherwise the film would be flying around too much, in the sense of stuck in the concept that when you see her and you're in between a serious film and a comedy, the whole film is between a serious film and a comedy. Yeah. And that's completely intentional, and kind of brave of Landis to do it. You know, if you're telling your lead, if one of your themes is telling your lead to commit suicide, you've got to have something in there that gives off life. And Jenny Agutter certainly does that. I haven't seen her in Call the Midwife, but now I might.
One thing one thing was that I thought the sex scenes were really pretty awful.
Yes, they made me uncomfortable. In fact, and part of it I was laughing at myself, because part of it was me going, "Get your hands off her." That's Jenny.
Yeah, but they're not. It's not that it's gratuitous sex scenes. It's just awfully done sex scenes. I don't.
Yes.
It was like they were trying not to show too much nudity or something. Jenny Agutter, so they're just holding each other and gnawing each other's shoulders in the shower.
Yes. and she was game. I mean, you know, but but I think Landis just was trying to do something that was beyond his reach,
right,
in the sex scene.
Yeah.
It's just you know, he directed Ghostbusters, right? Or was that somebody else?
No, that was Harold Ramis, I think.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Get those guys.
Okay, I won't get that wrong again.
Yeah.
But it was just beyond his reach.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like this scene where they're in the movie theater and all the victims are there to confront.
Yes, that's really good.
And the couple is there, the couple that he killed, and they're both really happy and they're like, cheerio. But yeah, that whole aspect of the movie where the victims come back and haunt him. I mean, and that's a really scary part of the movie too, where Jack tells him that he has to kill himself. You know, like you really feel that, and you kind of feel his youth, and the
yes,
the actual,
he had plans. He had a life ahead of him.
Yeah.
And suddenly, all of that's gone.
Yeah, and he's such a happy-go-lucky guy too, you know, and just they really get that across too when him and Griffin Dunn are like walking through the moors before they get to the slaughtered lamb, and they're just talking about their life back home, and you know, and having sex with Jill Stein or whatever, you know, and just talking about girls and everything, and then another scene that I thought was really, really good was the scene on the moors where they end up getting attacked. Just something about that scene that's very visceral and very well done. Whereas in most slasher movies or horror movies, it's kind of run of the mill attack scenes, but there's something very like the rain comes and then they're just like glistening in the moonlight and walking through the moors, and they don't know where they are, and yeah, that was done very well. There's a lot in it that I was really surprised at John Landis's the dynamic nature of his direction. That I don't know if he ever echoed that again in any of his other films.
except for Animal House, which I do think is kind of a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Both as a film in itself and as when it appeared and the effect it had on humor in general. Because that film really influenced Saturday Night Live. It influenced the humor of a generation. But except for that, I don't think I know his films very well. Because I'm the sort of person who I like my comedies silent.
Yeah.
I love silent comedies, and otherwise I like 1930s type wisecracking comedies.
Yeah.
But
I can't think off the top of my head of another movie by him except for Into the Night. But I think that
I liked Into the Night. That was the first time I saw Jeff Goldblum act. I'd seen him in a couple of things, but he didn't have a lead.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I saw Michelle Pfeiffer.
Really?
And yeah, and Into the Night worked for me, possibly because I wasn't expecting anything of it.
Yeah.
And because you didn't know the stars or how they were gonna function, it takes you by surprise. It's a film I might talk myself into watching again.
Yeah, well, it's an LA movie, and I think that having lived in LA, you probably have more of an appreciation for it. I think that people probably didn't appreciate it as much that didn't know Los Angeles. It's kind of an ode to LA, I think. Yeah, it's an alright movie, but yeah, I can't think of much beyond those movies. I think that those guys, like Harold Ramis and John Landis, didn't really appreciate a lot of the kind of cocaine debauchery end of 1980s Hollywood, and I think that they left. Like as far like Harold Ramis, I know did leave. He came back to Toronto, and yeah, I think that they just didn't fit into that kind of greasy producer world. They were I think that those characters in American Werewolf in London are kind of like projections of that generation of like young Jewish American guys and their humor, and just kind of being,
I think you're right,
brash and fresh and innocent and trying to start something new and get away from the past and yeah. One thing before we leave American Werewolf in London is I really appreciated the scenes in the saloon, like the depiction of the saloon and the people in the saloon and the villagers. I thought that those were very good.
I may have said this before, or on or off the record, but those pubs in those moors, yeah. I've been to them, and they're that way. I walked into a pub on the Dartmoor, and everything stopped, and they all looked at me, and I kind of said hi because you don't expect. And it was all men, and people kept an eye on me while I ate my whatever it was, and had a beer. Cause if I hadn't had a beer, I would have been run out of town. And then I went back walking on the moor, not at night. I think I've told you that there are good reasons not to, besides werewolves, not to walk out the moor at night. If the fog comes in, there are marshy places where you just get sucked in, and you can yell all you want. Nobody's going to come looking for you in the fog. But I was told very firmly to stay on the paths. The other thing at Dartmoor, anyway. There are ruins there that are thousands of years old, and they're just there. They're not fenced off or anything. There's just this pile of rocks that's in a circle and all this stuff, and those people have been there for generations and generations. It is a strange environment. Now, after hours, that's a whole different kind of atmosphere. That although Scorsese manages to make the city empty. It has an empty feel in After Hours. I kept wondering how he got the streets to behave so emptily, but because New York isn't like that. You're always hearing traffic in New York, in Manhattan. I mean, isn't like that. And that sense you have of the individual loneliness in After Hours. I mean, in American Werewolf, these two guys are friends, and Jenny Allgutter and the werewolf guy, they become friends. They become lovers. There's no kind of personal warmth in After Hours, I thought. What did you think?
Yeah, I think that part of that is the kind of the unsaid word in After Hours is cocaine. I think a lot of the characters are probably like supposed to be on some kind of cocaine, which is kind of like an atomizing drug among people. Like the first woman he encounters, Marcy, the Rosanna Arquette character, I think is supposed to be like a cokehead, but what I really like about this movie, I love the comedy of frustration. It's one thing I love about Charlie Chaplin is that so much of his comedy is about a frustrating situation that just keeps occurring over and over again, and that's pretty much like this whole movie is the guy. There's this theme of emasculation in the movie, like he never can complete his mission of getting laid in the movie. Combined with they keep alluding.
He never can complete anything.
Yeah, well, they keep alluding to his to castration in the movie too.
Yes.
Like when he goes into the bathroom at that bar and there's that graffiti right next to the urinal of the shark biting a guy's dick. You know
Yes.
But yeah, it's one of those movies where there's just this constant, you think he's gonna be he's gonna be satisfied, but he never is, and it reminded me of the discreet charm of the bourgeoisie, where they keep trying to have a meal together throughout the whole movie, and they can never complete their mission of just having a meal together. But yeah, that was one thing that I noticed about the movie is the guy's frustration, and it starts out with him in his office in this very predictable atmosphere, and you can feel his frustration in the atmosphere, and just how everything is so deeply predictable there, and then it's contrasted with this wild night that he has, which in the end, I think that that character would look back and think what a great night compared to my predictable, daily work life.
Well, in a way, but it, I don't know. I don't know that he'd say that because partly because the character, not Griffin Dunn, but the character isn't that bright. He's an unoriginal guy. He hasn't done much, and what what he's good at, and both as actor and character in the movie, is he accepts all this strangeness at first. He's not threatened by it. He accepts it. He's going along with it. And until it really gets out of hand and becomes malevolent, and then it's as though the malevolence is directed at him. It really isn't directed at him in a personal sense. Nobody knows him. But the malevolence that just comes off the street, as it were, not from bad people. There are no bad guys in that film. But a mob malevolence, a sense of unrest. The Linda Fiorentino character is my favorite. I love her anyway. Really seems the only one who's doing something that she wants to be doing, making her sculptures, and then the crisscrossing of events, the vagueness of the Rosanna Arquette character, how she can't quite get a hold on life, can't quite grasp life, and then her suicide, which is so critical, happens off camera and doesn't surprise you. I found that strange. In the sense of, it's very intentional with it, the performance, and that it happens off camera, and that it doesn't surprise you. And then the John Hurt character, is that his name?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Who, when he finds out about the suicide of his girlfriend, and the Griffin Dunn character realizes who his girlfriend is and what place he had in that event, his John Hurd's reaction, he seems like a completely out of place guy. Like, he seems like a California kind of guy in a New York City kind of atmosphere where, and it must be intentional because the casting is certainly intentional. So there's a vagueness to the movie that surprised me, because Scorsese usually isn't vague. And I wondered if he was doing something a little beyond his reach too.
Yeah, you can,
or out of his ballpark anyway.
Well, you can see in the technique of the filmmaking itself, the kind of a growing technique of Scorsese, the use of timing, like the timing of them. There's a rhythm to the movie. And it kind of builds up and then slows down and builds up, but there's a definite rhythm to the editing, and then the way he moves the camera around, in kind of simple scenes where it's just two people talking, but he'll move the camera in and out as they're talking and around them, and but you see the kind of the burgeoning of different techniques that he would use later on in his later films.
Yeah, he was caught between making a Hollywood film and a Scorsese film. Like Mean Streets and Goodfellas and Raging Bull are Scorsese films. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and After Hours are Hollywood films. Scorsese making Hollywood films. And didn't he make the so-called sequel to The Hustler too?
Yeah, Color of Money.
I interviewed him for that film, and he just didn't know what to say. He was uncomfortable being interviewed about it.
Really?
It was clearly not a personal film. It was clearly a film that it was a gig. There was nothing of the kind of almost Shakespearean atmosphere of the original film. Where
Right.
where in a pool hall Times Square kind of way, everybody's playing with ultimates and lives are at stake in a moral sense, and there was none of that in the. I cannot remember the title of that picture, but
Color of Money.
Paul Newman comes back. Color of Money, right? Good title. And there's none of that. That atmosphere that was there in Hustler.
Yeah.
And when I'd ask him questions about it, he was just real vague. And he wasn't that New York kind of talking guy at all that afternoon.
Huh.
He was almost queasy. I'd ask him something and I'd do a follow-up question, and he wouldn't kind of go there. It wasn't, maybe he was just having a bad afternoon. I've only met the guy once. So I can't interpret that. But the film, his Hollywood films, you don't get a sense of high stakes. The characters are supposed to have high stakes, but you don't really get that sense. More so in After Hours, you do get a sense of general failure, I thought. These people didn't know what to do with their lives. And then I didn't think Scorsese really knew what to do with them. That said, it's a film that you really need to watch to the end. You're going, where's he going? Where's he going? Where's he going? What's going to happen now? Because it is an unpredictable film. And that's something that has very much in its favor.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, my favorite scenes in the movie are Mohawk Night.
Yes.
That's a great scene, just him getting thrown around and then dragged over to have his hair shaved off and all that. But and then my other favorite scene is at the end when he finally meets like the sanest person in the movie, that lady who's just sitting in the bar and they dance to Is That All There Is, and then she kind of puts this little cocoon around him. She's kind of like a mother figure in a way.
Yeah.
And and then that's the end of the movie pretty much. But yeah, I like that lady a lot. Have you seen that actress before?
Her name is Verna Bloom, I think. And she was my understanding, she was a stage actress. A pretty famous New York stage actress. One of the you get these New York stage actors. Every generation, there's one or two who won't do films and won't do TV.
Yeah.
And they're very much the legitimate theater and the New York excuse me, and the New York stage. And I don't think I've ever seen her in another film. But she was a famous name in New York in her generation. I knew the name before I saw her.
Did you think it was a good New York movie?
Yes, in the sense of the New York of Manhattan, especially southern Manhattan in those days, the New York of people who are all from out of town, coming to be New Yorkers. It's very different from the New York I grew up in, where if you were from out of town, it meant you were from Europe. In the working class, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And almost everybody I knew was born in New York City. I didn't consciously know anybody not born in New York City until I went to summer camp. So I was 13 by then. And those are the first people outside of New York City I ever met. I didn't know I had an accent when I was a foster kid with this Boston family, and by then I'm 14. I'd say mother, and they would say mother, and I said, "That's what I said, mother." I didn't hear my accent. I had a very strong New York accent, and mother, father, coffee. How's a coffee? Coffee. Spent, I don't know, CWOOFFEE. And you didn't know you had an accent because everybody had an accent. So it was that New York. It was New York people from somewhere else. None of those people were New Yorkers. And that's what you got traditionally in the Greenwich Village area mostly. If you remember Reds, or Mrs. Dorothy, what's her name? Dorothy Harper, but that's not it.
Dorothy Parker?
Yes, Parker. Thank you very much. Mrs. Parker's Vicious Circle. Those people were all from elsewhere, and that was all Greenwich Village. Reds and Mrs. Parker's Vicious Circle. And that was turn of the century to I don't know, the 60s, the 70s. Then later, as Brooklyn was being developed, everybody from out of town was in Brooklyn. When I was teaching high school 20 years ago, most of the kids in my high school class eventually spent some time in Brooklyn. Went to school in Brooklyn, tried to be a writer in Brooklyn, tried to be an actress in Brooklyn. Brooklyn was the new Greenwich Village for a while, and then the real estate thing went up. So that's the New York that Scorsese, who is a New Yorker from Hell's Kitchen, but he was making a film about a different New York, not the New York he grew up in. Mean Streets is the New York he grew up in.
Yeah, I think he was trying to get funding. He was trying to get the studios to back Last Temptation of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't going ahead with the deal, and he needed to make a movie to make some money before that. So yeah, I think this was kind of a one-off thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. We should do that movie sometime.
Last Temptation?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to see it again.
Yeah, me too.
When do you want to do it?
Oh, I don't know. Why don't I shut this down and we can talk about that?
Okay.